Now, let's talk about some other whinging sounds that we've heard coming from the Work From Home Brigade down in Whitehall, because never mind Putin's war, our darling mandarins have far more pressing issues to attend to. And if you haven't read it for yourself, I'm elated to tell you that a load of civil servants took to the internet forum Reddit recently to bash orders calling for them to turn their cameras on during work meetings. Not an unreasonable request for most of them, you would think, but apparently not, because one Whitehall melter described the incident as insidious. I mean, these are the people who basically want to work from home, but they don't want to have to turn on a camera just in case anybody sees what exactly they're doing while they're working from home. Which seems to me to be a complete ridiculous kind of manoeuvrings of people who always say, oh, but we do much more work when we're at home. Well, obviously, they don't. They don't want to put the cameras on. They don't want to see people in their underwear, I dare say, or their pyjamas, or maybe even in bed. Who can say? We've got the panel back now, though. So, guys, I'm just going to ask you about what you think of this working from home manoeuvrings. I mean, we were told just the other day, I think civil servants were asked how many days they'd like to come into the office if they were made to, and they said 2.
What, 2
annually?
2 days a week.
2 days a week?
Yeah, no more than that, because they're so used to not being there.
Yeah. Well, these things are... They have a real life of their own, a real mission creep.
Yeah.
You know, what started out as an emergency response to an unprecedented situation very quickly became the new normal.
Yes.
And it's become embedded in all sorts of, all across the private sector, but especially by the looks of things within the civil service. And that I think the entitlement, the petulance of saying, I won't even switch on my camera.
Right.
That is, I mean, that is a really hard argument to make, that you're saying, well, I want to be at home, but I want absolutely no accountability because this is an unfair infringement on my rights.
Right, and more
as a
people,
private individual.
and more
or whatever.
people
And it's
saying,
like, no, but you have obligations to your workplace.
Yes.
We all do.
But apparently they don't want obligations, and we hear more and more of people who say, I don't want to be emailed when it's out of work hours. Well, when is out of work hours when you're working from home, exactly?
It's very interesting that Tobias Ellwood talked about people testing boundaries, because one of my themes is that the law itself is in a bad way.
Yes.
The boundaries are collapsing. So people are reaching out to test them. They're finding out that they don't really exist. And they're going, ooh, this is fun. Let me test another boundary. And this is clearly a boundary test. You know, you receive payment in obligation for working. It is an obligation. I'm glad we started using words. We need to start finding words again, like obligation and duty.
Yes.
You know, but if you're...
Responsibility.
You receive payment to do work, then there are going to be obligations placed upon you that you may not like.
Yeah.
And that's not insidious. And we keep finding these emotional responses. They are very having raised a child, they are very toddler-like.
Yes.
We're living in a very toddler-like world.
Oh, very much so. Well, Prince Harry's the absolute embodiment of the toddler, isn't he? I don't like it, so I'm going to just complain and complain and complain. Because I've got loads of money, I'm just going to keep hiring more lawyers to get what I want. But that's the other thing, isn't it, Ella? You get now... I'm not saying... I mean, we're all fortunate we have jobs that we probably quite enjoy doing. Not everybody does. But, you know, when I first sort of got my first job as a teenager working in some bakery or other, picking the green bits out of strawberries and getting horribly cold in a basement, you know, it wasn't meant to be enjoyable. You did work because you wanted money. And that was basically why you did it.
Well, I mean, the interesting distinction in all of this is that the removal of the boundary between public and private, or working life and home life.
Yes.
And, you know, those things, most people who have normal jobs, whether it be driving taxis in supermarkets, in factories, cleaning, whatever.
The bulk of people, in other words.
Want to have a very clear delineation, because you go to work to earn the money to enjoy your life at home with your partner or your kids or your dog or whatever. And there's this sort of, particularly within the civil service, there's just this total blurring where they want to treat the office like their home and their home like the office. And look, I've done some pretty brilliant articles, I think, from 5 o'clock in the morning from my bed.
Yes.
You know, it's not impossible.
That's a specific job that you can do from your bed,
but you know, the idea that you wouldn't, when you're in a sort of work environment, whether it's a meeting online or otherwise, that you wouldn't be able to turn up in your public persona, which is put together and ready for the world, and then be whoever you want to be in your private life. That sort of distinction is just completely gone now.
Yeah.
And that's a real problem, because it means that people don't have those sort of... Well, one, we don't treat the public sphere seriously. The world of work is meant to be a serious social, political hub.
Yes.
And the world of home is meant to be your private safe space, your genuine safe space. And if we don't have those distinctions, then we don't have those places anymore, and people become very unmoored and a bit screwed up. And I think it is... particularly with the younger generation, it's like you don't really understand how to be in the world. Because
well, and
there
also
is
now
this
we hear all
blurring.
these stories about all of these young people who are too stressed out to go to work. You know, they're suffering from anxiety and, you know, probably because they don't speak to anybody. You know, they sit there on their own, tapping away at a computer.
Which is making...
No wonder they're anxious to go out, you know?
And if you're not put into situations that are sometimes testing and challenging, then you never develop that resilience at all. And it's very important to do, and I'm sure that we've all had days at work that we were dreading, and then we turned up and it wasn't as bad as we feared, or we really worked hard and really set our minds to it and achieved something, and then you come away with it's a feeling unlike any other feeling, actually, when you've achieved something great.
Absolutely, especially when you were expecting it to be horrible.
Yeah.
And it was actually quite rewarding.
Well, I mean, as you said, you know, we're lucky to have jobs that we find interesting, and not every job will necessarily give that level of satisfaction. But I think if you're not even venturing outside, you're not even taking the risk of maybe experiencing something different. It's like you want every day to be very predictable and manageable and contained. And
I'm sure we've also all done jobs which weren't particularly enjoyable and which were difficult and challenging.
But the interesting thing about that is that work-life, even the kind of most rubbish job that we've all done you can imagine. I used to work in a cheese shop, which was like working in a fridge. The fun of it was that there was a guy that I fancied there, and so that would drive me to go as a teenager. And so a big part of working life for people is the people they work with and the free conversation you can have, you know, the relationships you can have. And the trend in working life, the kind of penalisation of working life has been such that whether it's, you know, overreach of HR, zero tolerance to harassment policies, speech codes, diversity, equality training, blah, 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 has made it so that the one fun bit of sort of work life, which is the space where you could have a conversation with people, use that word banter, whatever it is, that's been clamped down on. So I sort of almost, in a weird way, don't blame people from being like, oh, for God's sake, I'll just work from home and pet my cat.
Well, this is it. And I mean, most people,
I
I think, I'm right in saying, meet their partners or their future partners at work.
They used to.
Used to.
But now they're not having. Now they don't have partners. Now they're just like, you know, most of them have given up sex, they've given up fun, they've given up drinking.
Well, that is what's happening. But
God save us.
This is one of my recurring themes, that rules are good for mental health. Okay, so one of the reasons I like law, because I think we all establish right now I quite like law, is that, and my best mate will do this, if I get very anxious and very stressed, we start doing law. Because rules just calm you down. You know where the limits are. You know that you're safe. A boundary is what a law is.
As long as it's not the government making new laws,
because there are too many laws, then that drives you mad.
Exactly.
That destroys the clarity of law. And we need to get back to the idea that there are rules on adults, that they have to do things. One of the big ones is that, I mean, I think, was it you I saw tweeting about this new phenomena of listening to a video on your phone on the train?
Yes.
Right, well, we used to have a rule that you didn't do that, and we need that rule back.
You do.
Yeah.
We used to have a rule that adults didn't show emotion in public, and that's because adults showing emotion is very disturbing for people around. I mean, particularly, I as a middle-aged man, suddenly start having an emotional breakdown. That's going to be very scary for everybody around.
That all changed
because I'm quite strong.
When Princess Diana died. That was when that started. But we'll get onto that in another day.